Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our panelists and thank you to our panelists and participants for being here. My name is Khanem Sheikh, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our teach-in today. Our teach-in is entitled "The Path to Climate Justice Travels Through a Free Palestine." This is one of the many teach-ins that we've organized in the recent months on Palestine. And the focus of today's teaching is on the role of Palestine in the struggle for climate and ecological justice. Our panelists today will help us think about the ways in which colonization, occupation, war, and capitalism are both genocidal and ecocidal. I'd like to thank the Center for the Study of Arab and Muslim Worlds at Cal State San Bernardino for co-sponsoring this event, and the staff at the center who've provided valuable technical assistance that has made this program possible. The center is dedicated to broadening and decolonizing knowledge of the Muslim, Islamic, and Arab worlds through teaching, research, and community outreach. It is dedicated also to the inclusive study of all ethnic, religious, and cultural populations in what has been historically known as the Islamic and Arab worlds. I also want to share a little bit with you about the Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus of the California Faculty Association. And I'm a member of this caucus, the PAM caucus, we refer to this. And so I'll just share a little bit about the PAM caucus with you, and we'll drop sort of more information in the chat with you about the caucus. The Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus is a space to learn about, to critically discuss and lead on questions and issues concerning Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians within the academy, within labor movements, and as part of broader peace and justice movements. We do this while also collaborating on ways to promote racial justice and other forms of social justice work that are central to the mission of the California Faculty Association. PAM's members support and collaborate with California State University faculty, students, and staff who are targeted for harassment or censorship based on their research, teaching, or advocacy on justice for Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, or in Palestine. The caucus welcomes scholars, educators, and advocates who are committed to co-liberation with Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians, and who do not exceptionalize colonialism, apartheid, and military oppression in Palestine or elsewhere, but rather see it as part and parcel of the indivisibility of justice in our daily lives and as members of the California State University system. If folks are interested in getting involved in the Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll drop that information. Welcome once again for everybody, and I thank everybody for being here. I'm going to pass it on to Gopal, who's going to do the land acknowledgements and lead us into the program for today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to very quickly share my screen. My name is Gopal Dayaneni. I teach at San Francisco State University. I come to you from Huichin Village, the traditional territories of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone peoples. I live along the Temescal Creek, which drains into the San Francisco Bay. This is also the birthplace of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, among many other important social movements. And we recognize that for many, if not most of us, we are here through complex processes of colonization, imperialism, slavery, and war. We recognize that our presence was imposed upon the indigenous peoples of this land with or without our consent, and certainly without theirs. Every CSU campus is in territory bounded by a common bioregional identity that includes incredible biocultural and linguistic diversity from long before colonization. Our bioregion, with all the many peoples, can be can be thought of or is often named the Salmon Nation, defined by the Pacific Coast salmon runs that have been the backbone of culture and cosmology and food security for thousands of years. Our bioregion is defined by the rivers that run to the Great Sea, the Pacific. Palestine is also defined by a bioregional identity, rich with biocultural diversity going back thousands of years from the river to the sea. As uh, as we, the California Faculty Association, have consistently asserted, decolonization is not a metaphor. It is the real process of rematriation of land back to indigenous peoples, whether it is here in California or in Palestine. It is also the process of reparations, which is not simply the payment for past harms. True reparations is the repairing of our relationships such that the harm can never happen again. I invite you to scan this QR code to download the Native Lands app. That will help you identify the indigenous territories upon which you reside as a first step to beginning the process of right relationship. And if you, like me, live in the San Francisco East Bay, you can scan this QR code to contribute to the Sogorea Land Trust through the Shumi land tax. That those of us who are guests in this territory can contribute to the process of land back and rematriation. And this covers all the territories of the East Bay, and we've listed some of the places there. And we encourage you to support efforts of rematriation and land back wherever you are, and to advocate that your campus prioritize right relationship with the peoples of the territories your campus occupies. So we wanted to just have a little appreciation for all of these territories as we begin our conversation about climate justice and Palestine. So thank you for that. And I am going to get rid of my screen share here. All right. Sorry, not sure why this won't go away. Here we go. Okay, sorry. Just took me a moment to get myself organized here. We are really, really privileged to have several guests with us today who will be presenting on the relationship between climate justice and Palestine in a number of different ways. I'm just going to name our speakers, and then each of them will have about 10 minutes to present a little bit of framing for us and about their work in and for Palestine as it relates to climate and ecological justice. Our first speaker is Dr. Mazen Komsaya, Director of Palestine Center for Biodiversity and Sustainability, and at Bethlehem University, and the volunteer director of the Palestine Natural History Museum. Dr. Komsaya has been covering the relationship or working on the relationship between biodiversity, cultural diversity, resilience, and resistance for a very long time, and we're really honored to have you joining us. I know you're in Jordan right now, so thank you very much for joining us. We will also hear from the incredible Abir Al-Butmai, who is with the Palestine Environmental NGO Network, or PENGAN, which is also a member of Friends of the Earth International, and who's really brought environmental justice and environmental campaigns in Palestine forward for the entire international environmental community to organize around, especially through Friends of the Earth International, which has developed a strong solidarity approach to Palestine and many other places. One of our speakers today, Yasmin El Hassan from the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, is sick and will not be able to join us. She's not feeling well. She's based in Ramallah. So we're all wishing her well. We also have with us Lujain Al-Saleh from Frontline Catalysts, and who is a member of Arab Resource and Organizing Center, and who is an incredible organizer here in the San Francisco Bay Area, working with youth and the broader community, both on climate justice, public health, and of course Palestine solidarity and Palestine liberation work. And I have just had the wonderful privilege over this past year of getting to know Lujain and work with her. So I'm just so honored to be able to join the space with you. And of course, once again, my name is Gopal Dayaneni. I'm a lecturer in race and resistance studies, and I'm very excited to be a part of this panel. So Dr. Kumsaya, I'm going to invite you to lead us off and share sort of how you understand the relationship between Palestine liberation and climate justice in your work.
Well, thank you very much for doing this and for organizing this very important session. As mentioned, I was traveling for 5 days outside of Palestine, and I always feel like a fish out of water when I leave Palestine. It's tough, especially in these circumstances where our people are undergoing a systematic mass slaughter in Gaza, which is now beginning to spread in the West Bank, as you probably know, especially in refugee camps in Nablus and Jenin and other places. Where I am in Bethlehem, also at Dheisha refugee camp, Aida refugee camp, etc. But the main points I want to make in a very short period of time, obviously, is that there's a great overlap and synergy in actions, both for environmental justice, for human rights, and of course, those who work against those issues are work against them regardless of what these issues are, because they are greedy. I mean, I look at the COP28, which just concluded in United Arab Emirates, and I had written articles about this and the previous COPs, including, in Sharm el-Sheikh and other places, where I noted how, the elites basically running the show in this world kind of talk the talk and walk the opposite to their talk. And what Greta Thunberg said about the climate change conferences, that they go blah, 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 is exactly right. They essentially do the opposite of what they claim they want to do, which is deal with climate change. In fact, it's getting worse year after year. When we remember, this is the 28th what's called Conference of Parties that signed the climate change international conventions, 28 years of meeting in different countries and going blah, 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 and while doing the same thing that damaged the environment. But it seems to be getting worse every year. I mean, this year they had the conference in one of the worst countries on earth, the United Arab Emirates, in terms of its track record on environmentalism and on issues of guarding our environment. It's the UAE is really terrible. Not only that, but the chief that they appointed to run this, to be chair of the climate change conference of parties, is himself an oil chief. And the next meeting next October will be in Azerbaijan, another horrible country in its track records of human rights and climate issues, another oil-rich country. So these are the kinds of hypocrisies that we see led and who gave these ideas, these hypocrisies. Really, I think it's the Western world, primarily the US and Israel, I should say. To a lesser extent in Europe, Europeans are spineless in facing the US and Israeli lobbies. And when you see these things happening, how do I explain it? Let me step back and think about this in terms of rights versus might and greed. What is our human rights? It's very simple. I mean, every decent human being knows what these rights are. They are the right to live in dignity, to eat healthy foods, drink water that's healthy, and have a shelter. And, it's basically the basic common human needs. These are needs that are available if we were to have equity, to have justice. The planet can support a number of humans on it. It can deal with these needs. It can give them to everybody, but we don't do that. Why don't we do that? Because there are people who are making money off of these things. Let's take the intersection of human rights and then climate change, for example, on issues like clean air and clean water and food. The biggest polluters are, of course, those that engage in wars. For example, the military actually produce, the Israeli military alone produce more greenhouse gases than the people of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip combined. This is, and just the recent war on Gaza that now entered its third month, so a little over 9 weeks now, 68 days, 69 days of this conflict. Israel dropped something like 50,000 tons of bombs over 25, 30,000 individual bombs on Gaza. That includes depleted uranium, that includes white phosphorus, incendiary bombs, etc. These are all damaging to the environment. I actually just submitted a paper on the effect of wars on the environment, wars in Palestine on the environment. And I had 116 references in this research paper. And it shows, how much these wars have cost our environment. And when you think of conflict and war and its impact on the environment, there's a cross-cutting effects, synergies of effect between these things and climate change caused not just by war, caused by other effects like use of fossil fuel. The main reason actually is use of fossil fuel. So when I talk about the military causing a lot of environmental damage, a lot of it has to do with use of fossil fuel, but also use of these bombs, etc., that damage the environment and add to the climate change effect. But these synergies are working together because they are against people. If you want the opposite of that, which is a people-centered approach, you have to really think strategically, what are these people's needs and why can't they be met in a world that certainly, this little blue planet that we inherited, that we are destroying. So our research at the Institute, Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, we now publish 2 research papers every month. And in those research papers, highly, collected data on these effects. Sometimes you get very depressed collecting the data. It is not of course, sufficient to do research. You have to translate research into policy and into practice. This nexus, these gaps between research and policy, and between policy and practice are huge, and we have a lot of problems. And you have, as I said, we have more than 150 countries attending the COP. No, actually close to 200 countries attending COP28, and rich countries, wealthy countries that contribute most to the climate change, pushing against, any kind of climate justice or equity or rights-based approaches to climate change. I mean, any even idiot can realize that you cannot have any meaningful outcome of such meetings. So when you look at them, what do they produce? They produce blah, blah statements while actually increasing. I mean, UAE even used this conference to sell more oil, imagine. So they refused to talk about phasing out oil hydrocarbons, but instead they talk about alternatives, and we can do some things, we all need to be responsible, blah, 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 while doing the opposite, of course, and selling more oil and profiting from misery of a planet that is in pain. Our planet, I mean, Yasmin is sick with COVID, and I say it's like, like being sick. Our planet is very sick, obviously. It has fever, it has a lot of symptoms of this sickness. Well, what do you need to do to cure this planet? You need, first and foremost, to identify the right illness. You cannot treat a cancer with cosmetic, If you have cancer and you have skin rash and headache and anemia, you cannot say, well, take a cream for the skin rash and aspirin for the headache and you'll be okay. No, you have cancer. You've got to deal with this cancer. This cancer is the cancer of greed that is destroying our planet, and that is destroying people, sometimes in fast pace, like what's happening in Gaza, with over 20,000 people killed, over 8,000 children. This is one fast method of killing. There's a little slower methods of killing, like starvation, that's now happening in Gaza, and water shortage, but it's also happening in other countries that are faced by the climate change effects. And now, actually, globally, there are more, for the first time in human history, we have more climate change refugees than we have political refugees. And, of course, if we look at political refugees, the largest are still the Palestinian refugees. 8 million Palestinian refugees or displaced people. That's also about greed, of course, and about lust for power that the Zionists have. Israel has the highest per capita number of billionaires. And the UAE, the amount of money that's spent on golden cars and golden toilets and things like that is just staggering, when people are literally starving and dying of hunger. And that's an intermediate level of deaths. And then you get the slower death, which is even for many people less perceptible, but it's becoming more and more obvious. As climate change accelerates, you have, of course, fluctuations in climates that are causing floods and hurricanes and forest fires and so forth. When Israel was created, they destroyed our environment, they uprooted our trees, they diverted our water, like the Jordan River Basin, which went down from 1,350 million cubic meters per year to 20 million cubic meters per year. Became a stream, basically, but also uprooting millions of trees. Yes, they planted some trees, like pine trees. I'm talking about the Zionists planted a monoculture of pine trees, but these themselves are more susceptible to fires and are destructive for the biodiversity of our region. And we published some papers on this. But to go back to this, and I try to wrap up very quickly, to this problem between the science, which we have a lot of science, and we could talk endlessly about, and we are collecting data every day. I also just published a paper on the use of national parks to exclude Palestinians, and another paper on the use of nature reserves to exclude Palestinians, like in the South Hebron Hills and so forth. When you take all that science, how are you going to translate it to practice? How are you going to get it to affect a change in behavior? Well, we need a global uprising. I've been calling for a global uprising for 40 years now, and I wrote about it in my book, Sharing the Land of Canaan, published 20 years ago, where I explained that we need a global uprising, not just about the Palestine question or about climate change, but about all aspects of human suffering that is caused by this greed of the few, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And I think this global uprising is happening now. As more and more people are aware, more and more people are in the streets, more and more people engaged in things like boycott, divestment, sanctions against corporations that profit from this, General Electric and, Raytheon and those companies owned by very wealthy individuals, stock owners who make billions and billions of money off of the suffering of the common people. But the common people are us, we are the many, they are the few. So if we put our heads together and we work together, which I think is now happening more and more, the challenge can be important and can make a difference and is making a difference now. I'm going to put in the chat room a link to an open letter from the climate justice movement, which stands in solidarity with the Palestinian movement. Dozens of organizations have signed this statement, including our institute. And I'll also put my email and website on this. But we in the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability believe in this connectivity of our struggles, our human struggles. And whether we are like in our garden, we have a community garden growing our own vegetables, our own food sovereignty in the museum, in the institute, or working with the refugee children from the West Bank, or having a mobile educational museum that goes to remote areas, teaching, especially in marginalized and threatened communities like Bedouins, like villages along the wall. We have a mobile museum that goes to them to empower them, or from our work with women to sell their products and make organic produce. All our activities, the website that you can see our activities in is palestinenature.org. I'll also put it in the chat room. But there's a lot to be done, and action is the best antidote to despair, as one person said. So I encourage you all to get active in these. in these struggles. Everything, all the dads think globally and act locally is still certainly valid. So I ask you to get involved. And here I put my email also in the chat room. Thank you very much for listening. And keep hope alive. We shall overcome someday, I'm sure of it. I just hope that it happens during my lifetime. I'm a little older now, so I'm not sure. But we will see. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm going to invite Abir to please share a little bit about your work with Pengon and a little update on the current conditions and some of the campaigns that you've been working on as well.
Thank you, Gopal, and thank you, Dr. Mazen. Hello, everyone. I'm Abir Al-Butma, the coordinator of Pengon, Friends of the Earth Palestine, that unifies currently 15 environmental organizations. We work mainly on lobby and advocacy environmental campaigns at national level in West Bank and Gaza Strip. And also we are part of several international movements and federations. One of them is Friends of the Earth International. So we work in cooperation with them on international advocacy campaigns. One of the most important campaign that we work on, which is land right, natural resources, and water rights. Through this campaign, we document and highlight the Israeli violations against the Palestinian environment, the Palestinian land, water, and natural resources. When we talk about the Israeli occupation, for over 7 decades, the Israeli occupation has illegally appropriated and exploited Palestinian natural resources in Palestine. This includes land, water, building stones, minerals, as well as gas and oil resources. So when we talk about the Israeli occupation, it's not only the occupation on land, but also controlling the Palestinian natural resources. So the occupation benefits and the Palestinians pay the price. In West Bank, when we talk about, for example, the water sector, more than 85% of water resources, it is controlled by the Israeli occupation. There is no Palestinian sovereignty on our water resources, even if it is located in area in area A. Which is under the Oslo classification. We have area A, B, and C. Area A should be under fully Palestinian control, but regarding the water sector, when the Palestinian Authority or any environmental organizations or even individuals want to dig artesian water well, we have to take a permission from the Israelis, and they usually and mostly they put a lot of restrictions in order to prevent the Palestinians and to put control on the water resources. The semi-governmental company, the Israeli company, which is called the Mekorot company, that is responsible on water and wastewater management inside Israel. This company practices water apartheid and water discrimination. For example, the Palestinian water consumption, when we compare the Palestinian water consumption compared with the Israeli illegal settler, the average water consumption for the Israeli illegal settler is 4 times the Palestinian citizen. And in some communities like the Jordan Valley, that is a strategic area for the Israelis. So they put a lot of restrictions in order to enforce people to forcefully them leave their land. So they prevent the Palestinians in order to develop any water infrastructure there. There is no water networks. So when we compare the Palestinian consumption there with the Israeli illegal settlers, the Israeli illegal settlers consume more than 8 times the Palestinian who live in the Jordan Valley. So the water consumption for the Palestinians who live in the Jordan Valley between 10 liter per capita per day to 20 liter per capita per day, while WHO standards 150 liter per capita per day. So the Israeli occupation denying the Palestinian rights in our water resources. They steal the Palestinian water resources, and they let them us like customers for them, and we buy our water resources. Regarding the natural resources, the water springs, we have in Palestine 56 water springs. 36 of them, it is under the Israeli control. And a new strategic practice for the Israeli illegal settlers is controlling more and expanding the settlements nearby these water springs in order to prevent the Palestinians to reach these water springs. And as you may know, that the Palestinian farmers, they depend on these water springs for to irrigate their crops. So the Israeli settlers, in cooperation with the Israeli soldiers, they prevent the Palestinian farmers to benefit from these water springs, and they create threats to these farmers and even to the normal people who want to visit these water springs. Also, when we talk about the one of the most important natural resources, which is the fossil fuel, oil and gas, even if from environmental aspect, as environmental organization, even we want to keep these fossil fuel resources under the ground, but we have the right, the sovereignty right for these natural resources. But the Israeli occupation deny the Palestinian rights. There is no Palestinian sovereignty on any of these fossil fuel resources, even in West Bank and also in Gaza. In West Bank, we have what we call major oil and gas reservoirs. 85% of fossil fuel reservoirs are located inside the Palestinian territories, inside West Bank. Majid, which is located in the western borders from the north to south, 1.5 billion barrels from oil and 182 million barrels from gas. And also the Gaza Marine, the Marine 1 and Marine 2, which is gas aquifer with a capacity around 30 million cubic meter. So there is no Palestinian sovereignty on these natural resources in West Bank and also in Gaza. When we talk about the current attack against Gaza, the Gaza Strip live under the environmental and human genocide. The Israeli occupation targeted all the environmental elements inside Gaza, and also before this attack, during the past 17 years, Gaza Strip lived under the siege with a lot of restrictions to enter the basic needs for people in Gaza. There is restrictions for the amount of fuel that is needed to operate the wastewater treatment plants, the water pumps, and the water desalination plants. So Gaza Strip before this current attack suffered from different environmental problems, and also before this attack the Gaza Strip live under environmental Nakba, which is environmental catastrophe as a result of the Israeli siege on Gaza. Around 97% of water it's unfit for drinking use. This is before, and now people suffer from a lack of fresh water. People drink saline water if it is available also. In the beginning of this attack, we focused on the northern part, but currently there is no safe place inside Gaza. Northern and southern part of Gaza are targeted by the Israeli occupation. Also, several infrastructural projects like solar energy projects inside Gaza were attacked and were damaged as a result of the Israeli attack. In addition to the wastewater treatment plants and desalination plants. And as a result of the lack of fuel, the majority of the desalination plants, the wastewater treatment plants also were stopped as a result of the lack of fuel. So the wastewater is flow raw wastewaters flow to the sea without treatment. In addition to the prohibited and banned weapons and pumps that are used against the Palestinian environment and the Palestinian civilians, and the long-term impact of these illegal weapons and pumps, we cannot measure the long-term impact of these illegal pumps. The statistics shows or indicates that more than 45,000 tons of these chemical pumps were dropped on the small area which is Gaza Strip, and this equal around 3 nuclear pumps. You can imagine what is the impact on different environmental elements, on the air, on the soil, on the groundwater, on the humans also. And as a result of the lack of suitable wash conditions and hygiene conditions, different diseases are spreaded as a result of lack of water and the bad hygiene situation inside Gaza Strip. When we talk about the West Bank also, since the 7th of October and before, Palestinian environment is used as landfill for the Israeli occupation. The Israeli occupation targeted the Palestinian environment with different pollutants and with different sources of pollution. Around 15 solid waste treatment are moved to be inside West Bank. So the solid waste and the pollution for the Palestinians and the raw materials, the benefits to the Israeli settlers. Also, the Israeli occupation deals with the Palestinian land as a landfill. So a huge amount of solid waste, mixed solid waste, medical solid waste with chemical solid waste are transferred to be dumped in the Palestinian land. When we talk about also the agricultural land, which is mostly located in Area C, around 64% of the Palestinian land inside West Bank is located under the Area C, and within the past years, the Israeli restrictions and the Israeli settlers' threats are increased against the Palestinians who want to reach their land. In addition to the expansion of the illegal settlements. When we talk about 1 year, the expansion of the Israeli settlement, it was around 3.5% of the West Bank area, while also the bypass roads around 2% of the West Bank area. So the bypass roads, and also it is equal to the Israeli illegal settlements in 1 year. The Israeli occupation, in cooperation with the settlers, practice control and denying the Palestinian sovereignty in our land and also in the natural resources. During the current attack, when we talk about the fossil fuel resources, the Israeli occupation gave a permission and licenses, around 12 licenses for 6 companies in order to start drilling for the gas and oil in the marine in Gaza Strip. So within these very bad situation, they didn't and they save time, and they target the Palestinian. They didn't stop targeting the Palestinian natural resources and stealing the Palestinian natural resources. When we talk about climate justice, we cannot achieve climate justice under occupation. One of our main campaigns is climate justice and energy. Through this campaign, we try to find solutions and alternatives to adapt with the climate change. In Gaza Strip, there is a lot of alternatives, solutions, initiatives, depending on solar energy projects in order to solve the energy scarcity inside Gaza. They have a great success stories depending on the clean energy sources in agricultural sector, in water sector, at institutional level also. But the Israeli occupation damaged the majority of these success stories. When we talk about climate justice, Palestine is a cause of human rights and climate justice. The defense of our land and resources and our opposition to Israeli greenwashing companies and institutions are part of our struggle, which is linked to global struggles for indigenous rights, land rights, and the struggle against the fossil fuel industry and climate colonialism. At the end, I can share you the recent fact sheet about the climate justice in Palestine is a human right, and also other infographics that highlight the Israeli illegal practices against the Palestinian environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abir. We encourage everyone to also check out the amazing work of Palestinian Environmental NGO Network. We'll put the link to Pengan in the chat as well. And thank you for all of that incredible and horrific detail. Lujane, I want to hand it over to you to share a little bit from your work and perspective in climate justice here, as in connecting it to Palestine with the youth and beyond, and the work of solidarity.
Thank you so much, Gopal. And just thank you so much for having me here today. I am so honored to be on this panel with Dr. Mazen and Abir, and just grateful for all of the organizers that made this happen. And just before sharing about, just sharing more about the youth and the importance of international solidarity, I first want to honor the nearly 20,000 Palestinians that have been killed over the past 2 months. I would also like to honor my cousin, Rushdie al-Sarraj. On October 22nd, Rushdie was killed in his family home in Gaza City by an Israeli airstrike. Rushdie was an incredible journalist, filmmaker, and storyteller who co-founded Ain Media with his childhood friend Yasser Mortaja in 2012. 5 years ago, Yasser was deliberately shot by an Israeli sniper while covering the Great March of Return in 2018. Like Shireen Abu Akhla, Yasser was wearing a press jacket. Both Yasser and Rushdie dedicated their lives to documenting life in Gaza and the immense beauty of Gaza and its people amidst the backdrop of the ongoing brutality and violence under occupation. Recently in 2019, Rushdie and Ain Media joined Forensic Architecture to document the Israeli army's continuous aerial spraying of herbicides along the border of the Gaza Strip. He also worked on 3 short films on food sovereignty challenges in Palestine and the US, led by Layla El-Haddad and Maggie Schmidt, authors of the Gaza Kitchen, a Palestinian culinary journey. We will never forget their legacy and their role in amplifying what the world needs to know about Gaza, about Palestine, about justice. Given the gravity of the moment we are in today, I will cover the importance of international solidarity with Palestine within the climate justice movement, which includes actively countering and resisting Israel's greenwashing campaign. And finally, I will conclude with how we are connecting the experiences of the young people that we work with in East Oakland, California, with Palestine and larger issues of colonization around the world. I would like to first start off with a recent experience I had within a Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led climate justice network that I'm a member of. On October 9th of this year, that marks Indigenous Peoples Day in the US, the Climate Network Group shared a message honoring Indigenous people in the network. They then shared, quote, "We also wanted to take a moment for anyone who might be impacted by the unrest happening in Israel and in other parts of the globe for which there might not be global attention at the moment," end quote. When I first read this message, I was deeply disappointed and disheartened that they could not even name Palestine as they simultaneously honored Indigenous Peoples Day in the US. At the same time, I was really heartened to see many others on the thread directly respond and call on the network to name Palestine and the ongoing genocidal war against the Palestinian people. Someone on the thread shared the following message, quote, "It is unacceptable that we make land acknowledgements in the US while simultaneously ignoring the colonization of Indigenous peoples elsewhere. Being in the US, we must also condemn the financing of the colonial machine by the United States. The balance of power between the colonizers and the colonized in Palestine would be markedly different if not for the continued and ongoing US bankrolling of Israeli colonization and settlement. Solidarity with Indigenous peoples struggling against colonial occupation cannot be conditioned on their behavior as good victims, nor can we ignore the brutality of decades of settler colonialism and war waged in illegally occupied territories," end quote. Although a genuine apology was issued by the organizer and resources about Palestine were shared with the network, the initial message that was shared speaks to the immense work that climate justice organizations and networks in the US need to do both internally and externally. The climate justice movement cannot be silent in the midst of the ongoing genocide and the destruction of Palestinian land. As Israel continues to take and exploit land, mainstream environmental groups like Sierra Club, which actively hosts environmental trips to Israel, have completely bought into Israel's greenwashing campaign that touts itself on technological innovation in the name of conservation and sustainability. Back in 2016, I remember waiting for a bus in San Francisco and seeing a big advertisement on the side of the bus about a collaborative partnership between Israel and California to, quote, "solve the drought and secure our future" through desalination technology. To no surprise, the bus ads were paid for by Stand With Us, an international right-wing Zionist advocacy organization. As Dr. Muna Dajani, policy analyst at Al-Shabaka, the Palestinian Policy Network, describes in a recent article titled how Palestine's climate apartheid is being depoliticized. Many of these collaborative initiatives and donor-funded programs also promote the idea that climate-related issues can be solved with technology without addressing the underlying political realities. The climate crisis, however, is not a natural phenomenon. It is human-made and compounded by political and economic decisions. In the case of Palestine, the effects of climate change are influenced and exacerbated by Israeli settler colonialism and the theft of natural resources. Rather than advocating for putting local, national, and international pressure on Israel to commit to adhering to Palestinians' water rights, the EU and other donors have emphasized the potential for technology to solve what they have framed as water scarcity in Palestine. This donor-led development scheme obscures a fundamental political reality. Water scarcity in Palestine is linked to Israel's military occupation and its theft of Palestinians' natural resources, including water. Our youth in East Oakland that participate in the Frontline Catalysts Climate Leadership Program, who are as young as 11 years old, understands what Dr. Dajani describes. They understand what greenwashing is, and they also understand that the ongoing displacement and the violence against Palestinians is not complicated. Most of our students are Black and Latino, and the majority of our Latino students' families come from Guatemala and El Salvador, where their own people were massacred by their country's US and Israel-backed genocidal campaigns against indigenous peoples. In the case of both Guatemala and El Salvador, Israel provided the ammunition, intelligence, and counterinsurgency campaigns and military training that killed hundreds of thousands of indigenous peoples across both countries. Israel's military relations with right-wing groups and regimes span across Latin America from Mexico to Chile. Along with this direct link in the role of Israel in carrying out massacres and genocides in our students' home countries, our youth face various forms and layers of violence, from environmental racism to police brutality and physical violence in East Oakland. Many youth have shared their experiences with and trauma from violence, racism and discrimination, neighborhood conditions that are unhealthy and unsafe, high levels of poverty, and major stressors on their mental health, such as anxiety, depression, and social isolation. For example, a 2021 Environmental Defense Fund study on the air pollution impacts on the Bay Area, it was found that up to half of new childhood asthma cases in East and West Oakland, where more than 70% of the population is Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American, were caused by exposure to traffic-related air pollution. Despite the massive systems of oppression that our youth face, they are incredibly resilient and steadfast in the face of these oppressions. I have been so touched by how much our students want to learn about Palestine and how much they want to speak out and make change in their communities and in Palestine. I just want to end with a statement that was written by one of our 6th grade students named Alexa. Palestine gives us a lot of stuff like culture, kids, love, and the most important, family. But you know what Israel is doing to Palestine? They're bombing the place. By doing that, they are destroying Earth, and we live on Earth. They've taken over houses, people lost their homes. Why fight for land if we could all support each other in this crisis? A lot of the kids and adults have been getting sick. They have nowhere to go because the hospitals have no electricity. They're also sending weapons to Israel. And by they, I mean America. Look at all we have. We should appreciate all of it, because imagine you being a Palestinian, waking up every day, scared because you don't know what can happen to you. You can be shot or bombed. You have no idea what will happen. We have a lot. Alexa, our youth around the world, they understand and they will never forget. Youth understand the importance of international solidarity, and they will keep fighting for climate justice and for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lujane, for sharing that and making all of those other, really important connections to other struggles and the complicity of the settler, colonial, and imperial projects on particularly Israel and Latin America. So once again, my name is Gopal, and I just want to share a few thoughts, and then we encourage folks to put questions in the Q&A, and we're so that we can have some time for a little more open discussion with our panelists. I want to start. I want to speak to those of us who work on or teach about or are spending our time focusing on climate and climate disruption, because one of the something that I think is really, really important for us is to engage in the battle to reframe the climate crisis as not being about atmospheric concentrations of CO2, and that the climate crisis did not begin with the burning of fossil fuels, but that the actual crisis is the erosion of land and of labor and of living systems and the exploitation of seed and of soil and of stories, and that the climate crisis begins with colonialism and imperialism. And if you want to solve the climate crisis, you can't look up at the atmosphere and count carbon. You have to look down at the economy, and the nature of the economies that we live in. Because the story that the climate crisis is about carbon in the atmosphere distracts us from the strategic points of intervention for change, in the same way that the story about Palestine it gets told as if it begins in 48 or it begins on October 7th, ends up distracting us from the actual root cause of the problem and the actual points of intervention for change. So there's a direct relationship between the narrative on climate and the narrative on Palestine, and both are ones that we can easily connect if we reframe the story of climate change. And so I really want to encourage all of us who work on climate and climate disruption to take on that responsibility. And then I had the wonderful privilege of being in the West Bank and in Gaza this summer in July and August. And so I want to just share very briefly, as someone who organizes for ecological justice, the important lessons I took away from that. The first thing I want to name is that the conditions created by occupation are as inhospitable as our worst nightmares of climate catastrophe. And yet, Palestinians persist, resist, and sustain themselves through the daily practice of resilience that we need, all of us everywhere, to learn from, to navigate the climate regime change with the greatest equity and justice possible. So I'll just name a few things, and some of these have already been named by Abir and by Dr. Mazen and by Lujane. But in the Union of Agricultural Work Committees and Al-Ard, the organization that Yasmin represents, who couldn't join us today, they have an amazing seed library defending Palestinian seed, and those seeds are then used to support Palestinian farmers to grow traditional Palestinian foods as an expression of food sovereignty. Those seeds are used to create rooftop gardens in refugee camps to grow food and build economic self-sufficiency for Palestinians in refugee camps, in the most highly dense populated areas in the world. Water is life and is used as a weapon of war, as we heard. But Palestinians and Palestinian social movements are fighting the fragmentation of their communities by creating DIY water infrastructure to connect villages that are separated from water sources. Union of Agricultural Work Committees is supporting Bedouin villages that are routinely subject to demolition orders every time they try and build structures, by supporting them in the improvement of the traditional dwelling of the caves, right? Every time that olive orchards and olive trees are bulldozed, they are replanted and they regrow. In Gaza, I experienced incredible low water farming innovations because of the destruction of their water, modeling for us how we can sustain food sovereignty under the adverse conditions of the water crisis, the hydro crisis, which is absolutely a part of the climate crisis, right? All climate plays out in water. And as was mentioned, the Gaza Community Mental Health Program has a giant rooftop solar array and a room full of battery storage so that they can continue to provide care in the community when Israel cuts the power or bombs infrastructure. So the very daily practices of persistence and resistance to occupation are all of the things those of us in the climate justice movement are advocating as the solutions in our communities everywhere. And we are watching it in real time happen and unfold in Palestine, as in many other places in the world. But food sovereignty is alive, energy democracy is alive, transformative justice is alive. The ways in which Palestinian communities must address harm and hurting because the existing systems that are supposed to address harm and hurting are the most carceral and the most violent anywhere in the world. So I just want us to remember that the story of Palestine is not only the story of the violence and the abuse and the suffering. It is actually it is actually a window into how we navigate the climate crisis with equity, justice, compassion, and democracy. So I just wanted to uplift that as my contribution to the conversation, and invite us to raise questions. If folks have questions they want to raise in the Q&A, please do that. Kanum, if you also have anything you want to lift up or contribute, please do that also. And if we don't get questions in the chat, we'll start asking each other questions. I wanted to invite you if you wanted to share any more, if there's anything you wanted to add to the conversation as one of our hosts.
I don't have anything particular to add. I'm not necessarily, this is not my area of work, but I learned so much just listening to all of you and I'm thinking about all this. And thank you for your powerful presentations.
So one thing I'll just start, I'll open a question while we're waiting for more questions to arrive, is Dr. Mazen, I was hoping that you could share a little bit about the ways in which those folks who want to be in solidarity with Palestine, and particularly those of us in academic institutions or engaging in teaching and learning, can engage with Bethlehem University, with the Palestine Center for Biodiversity and Sustainability. I know you host lots of different ways for people to engage, so that we can improve our capacity to make the connections between climate justice, ecological justice, sustainability, and Palestine.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the other speakers for plugging in very important points about what we are facing here. About 20 years ago, I wrote an article called The Environmental Nakba to Come. And actually, in retrospect, if I was writing it again, I would say the environmental Nakba, like the Nakba of 1948, has been ongoing with us. And it is, overdue time to deal with those things. So what can people do? There's a lot that people can do, in my humble opinion, generally for Palestine, but also for specifically for environment and the cross-cutting issues of the environment and political and human rights. I put in the chat a link to what you can do from my website 75 actions that can be done. That includes boycott, divestments, sanctions, media work, lobbying, solidarity, volunteering, going out teaching in your own community, etc. Different people can do different things. We don't all have to do the same thing. Somebody is an artist, they can certainly use their art in a form of resistance. Somebody is interested in music, they can use music for resistance. If somebody is interested in politics, certainly they can proceed along those lines. Now, the question that really, oh, sorry, I am putting direct messages and Gopal is transferring them to everyone. Thank you, Gopal.
Of course.
But anyways, in terms of our own institute, we certainly welcome volunteers, both volunteers from abroad and volunteers that can travel and stay with us. We offer room and board for volunteers. We have a lot of needs in our garden, our databases, in our media department, and the various aspects that we are doing in agriculture and working with the women and with the children, education and empowerment actions. So there's a lot that can be done, both if you want to come and spend time with us or from where you are. So any of the audience here, they're welcome to email us. I'll again put the email in the chat room for this, but info@palestinenature.org, you can reach us. And really, I think, it's a very, for me, I'm a full-time volunteer, by the way. I work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and sometimes longer, like tonight. It's now 2 o'clock in the morning in Amman. But anyways, but I find this the most rewarding aspect, is to have all these good people that you interact with, that you meet with. If anybody wants to be on our email list of action, we send a message every week, but it's been more frequent now that we are in an emergency situation. Send me your email at the same email, info@palestinenature.org. I can add you to our email list. And I see Sang asked a question, if somebody else wants to take it. How can we break through the information embargo on environmental destruction caused by the occupation? Most people in the USA do not know about the issues you speak. I think there's a lot of ways. The environment actually provides a very unique tool of organizing. Everybody is interested in the environment. It's like the weather. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. We need to do something about it. So we can talk about the environment and we can act on it. And I encourage everybody to approach their neighbors, speak to them about the environmental destruction that Abir talked about in Gaza. I'm happy to send the article I wrote that has 116 references on the impact on the environment, but I have even a bigger opus, a book that I did with the Land Research, for the Land Research Center, about colonization and its impact on the environment. That has over 700 references. So the main thing is to get the information out and to act on it by pushing people, writing to your environmental groups. Sometimes we succeed in some of our lobbying actions, like we did with the Sierra Club on their trips or others. sometimes we're not so successful. But even when we're not so successful, the information we put out starts to sink into people. And sometimes I'm surprised that a few years later, somebody who was even a Zionist, who resisted the information, is now anti-Zionist and works with us. So things can change, and we just have to push harder, and we have to mobilize more people.
Thank you. There's also a question here for Lujane that I think is actually a very good local one. And then also Abir, I thought you might have some thoughts about that, other ways to get more information out. But Lujane, do you want to respond to this question, which is, can you talk about some of the success AROC and others have had in building solidarity between Oakland and Palestine around climate justice and some of those connections that have been made here?
Yeah, definitely. And something it's related to the question that Sang asked as well. So that's also a really important question. There's so much information, and sometimes it might feel for people living in the US like they don't fully understand like how is this connected to climate justice. And I think what's really important is to make the links and the connection between environmental racism in the US to the environmental racism and environmental apartheid in Palestine, and along with that, the destruction of native land in the US as well. So making those connections is really important for people to see, for people to be able to understand what's happening. And then in terms of some of the successes that AROC has had in building solidarity between Oakland and Palestine around climate justice, we're very well connected with locally in Oakland with the Segurate Land Trust, which is an Ohlone-led organization that focuses on also land back in Oakland, also, works across the United States to build solidarity with other Indigenous groups. And so that's just one way we've been working around expressing solidarity with our Native sisters and brothers here in Oakland. And yeah, one way that we are able to make the connection between what's happening in Oakland and Palestine.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions that have come in, and I want to just give Abir an opportunity to also respond to some of these. I just wanted to also but very briefly, add a thought, which is there is something really important about the role that Palestinian social movements have played in intervening in broader global social movements to expand our understanding of the connections between Palestine and climate justice. So the role of Union of Agricultural Work Committees in La Via Campesina, the international peasant movement, has brought Palestine into the food sovereignty conversation over the last 20 years in a way that we hadn't seen before. Again, we're seeing the way in which the connection between indigenous peoples and the indigeneity of Palestinian peoples as an intentional solidarity building effort globally that has then really helped in US social movements and global social movements see Palestine as part of the larger indigenous land struggle. So I think and I know Abir, for your work, really getting Pengan as recognized inside, Friends of the Earth, and building solidarity programs among the mainstream environmental movement, or more mainstream environmental movement, has been a big part of your work also. So just to name that, it's not just happening, from here, it's the active work of social movements in Palestine to expand the frame. So I just wanted to offer that. And maybe Abir, I'll invite you if you want to share a little more on that. And also, there's a couple of questions in the chat that you might be interested in speaking to. One is about the health impacts about the climate crisis on Palestinians, and how climate, colonization, and health are interacting. So yeah. If you wanted to share, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Gopal. Regarding the climate change in Palestine, Palestine is suffer from the climate change and also the Israeli occupation threats. So, the climate change in Palestine, it's not only a natural phenomena, but also a political phenomena. When we talk about coping with the climate change, the most important sector, which is water sector and agricultural sector. How we can cope with the climate change without water sovereignty, without Palestinian water sovereignty, and without Palestinian sovereignty on our land. So always the main threat and the main restriction is the Israeli occupation. Regarding the question about the health impact of the climate change, when we talk about Gaza Strip, as a result of water contamination and the scarcity of clean water, as I mentioned, 97% of Gaza's scarce water is unsuitable for human consumption. The contaminated water causes 26% of all illness in Gaza, and is the cause of more than 12% of child deaths. This is the statistics about the health impact of also the waterborne diseases in Gaza Strip as a result of the water pollution. Regarding the health impact of the climate change in West Bank, there is an impact on the agricultural sector. Regarding the Palestinian statistics, when we talk about the crops, the wheels crops mainly, when you compare it between 2010 and 2020, the production of these crops reduced to 10%. This is a result for the season shifting and the rainwater random and irregular rainfall. So the season shifting caused, because when the rainfall during May, which is the harvesting time, so these agricultural crops damaged, and it caused agricultural loss for the farmers. Also, there is hygiene and, as I mentioned, waterborne diseases in the Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley as a result of water scarcity and the bad hygiene situation as a result of the water scarcity. This is regarding the health impact. But currently during this attack against Gaza, there is skin diseases appear, new diseases as a result of the water pollution, air pollution, and the very bad hygiene situation inside the schools and between the people in Gaza.
Yeah, and the daily exposure to tear gas in the West Bank and in camps and all of that has huge health implications. I think maybe for our last question, we can start with Lujane and maybe each person can answer. I think Dr. Mazen also spoke to this a little bit, but given how, and I think sometimes it's framed for us this way, but given how hopeless it feels, both the climate crisis and the way the disproportionate impacts on the global South, and particularly in this moment on Palestine, where do we find hope to resist, and how do you encourage people to resist? So maybe Lujane, we'll start with you. Where's your source of hope, and what do you encourage people to do?
Yeah, thanks for that question. For me, I have a lot of hope in youth here youth in Palestine, youth in Oakland, youth across the world, and just seeing, I think, the number of people coming together to fight against genocide, to stop this. And I think ultimately, what gives me hope is everyone here, my community, and just all of the incredible work that everyone is doing to fight for liberation and to fight for justice.
Abir, can you share where your reservoir of resistance is coming from?
As Palestinians, we believe in Palestinian rights in our land, in our natural resources. So what we and our demand is to lift up Palestinian voices, share these realities in different ways, in social media, in different environmental dialogues. Also starting cooperation between universities, for example, in USA and also in Palestine, in order to create linkages and environmental dialogues in order to share these realities. It is important also to boycott the greenwashing companies and corporate with Penguin and also other environmental organizations and universities aiming to form a pressure to hold the Israeli institutions and companies that practice environmental apartheid in Palestine, and to put it under accountability for violating Palestinian rights. One of these companies, which is Mikorot Company, the water company, that start new cooperations in different countries in the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe. And there is some success stories to boycott and stop these cooperations. One of them, the Dutch municipality. And yes, you can be part of these kind of resisting and stopping these cooperation in your country, because it cannot be acceptable practicing water apartheid in Palestine and be water professionals in another countries. Yeah, and our short-term demand is calling and participating and help bringing attention to what is happening in Gaza, take part in protests, marches, or media messages. There are different powerful way to demonstrate solidarity with Gaza and call for an immediate ceasefire.
Thank you, Abir. And thank you, Lujane. Mazin, is there something you wanted to add really quickly? We're pretty much out of time, but if there's anything in terms of hope and resistance that you'd like to add very quickly before we close.
Well, I take a longer historical situation for humanity. We've always had this struggle, this evil that's present around us, the greed that I mentioned is always there, but always there also is the actions of good people trying to do good things and resist. And as we say, existence is resistance. We cannot give up. We cannot despair. the future, as Howard Zinn once said, is a succession of presents. So we need to always act every day. We need to wake up, think what we can do on that day, in that particular moment. These are pivotal moments in human history. They're pivotal moments in Palestine, as you heard when we speak about genocide, Holocaust, basically what's happening to the Palestinians. But yet, I'm always inspired by the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine, the children who do not give up, the adults who do not give up. They, you see videos of these people speaking, having lost their house, their family members, their wife, their children, whatever, and they still say, Alhamdulillah, and praise be to God, we will survive, and we will not give up, and we will resist. If those people who lost everything basically can say these things, what excuse do we have living, having food, having shelter, etc., having our family members for not acting? As you know, I am from Shepherd's Field, where the shepherds heard the angels sing, and were told to go to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. And in a couple of weeks, or less actually, we will have Christmas in Bethlehem. We're restricting it to religious observances. But I always think of Christmas season as a season of hope, a season of rejuvenation, where we think there is, Jesus, we consider him the Prince of Peace as Palestinian Christians, and also our Muslim brothers and sisters recognize Jesus as a prophet who preached peace and preached justice, told his followers, told us basically to work for the oppressed, to go, to where the most need is. So in this season, I consider it a season of, yes, it is a season of tough times and really, really horrific times. And sometimes we don't sleep thinking about the images that we see. I lost some friends in Gaza and also in the West Bank. So far, 23 of my colleagues and friends died, were killed by the Israelis. But it's also a season of hope, and my wife is Chinese, and in Chinese, the symbol for challenge is the same symbol as for opportunity. So we have an opportunity to work to spread the word about Palestine and to act in a way that brings peace and justice, which eventually will be good for everybody. I think the Zionists, the Israelis, having been educated in racist and apartheid mentality, they don't understand what's good for them, and they're like addicts to war and addicts to destruction. We must, like my relative who was addicted to alcohol, not enable them, but we must challenge them, and we must make them correct their ways. And at the same time, also, I would say, again, another Chinese saying, light a candle better than cursing the dark. So we need to spread positive messages, messages of hope, messages of, resilience, sumud, and we need to continue to work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for those beautiful and perfect words to close out our program today. And I would say I'm in Los Angeles, and I am suddenly part of 13 different groups of people, cross-racial, cross-class, who are on the streets every day, participating in direct actions, in academic work, in all kinds of sectors of society, in solidarity with Palestine in very powerful ways. So I think that there is hope, and there is a goodness of people to fight against oppression on all fronts. We at the Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus demand that the university end study abroad and academic collaborations with Israeli academic institutions, which have been essential to legitimizing the brutal occupation of Palestine. We call on the university and every one of us across our disciplines to support academic, educational, and study abroad cooperation with Palestinian universities. I thank you again for attending. I know it's late at night for some of you, and thank you to our participants for being here today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting. We just want to remind everyone that this is going to be posted. It's recorded, and so you can share it and spread the word. Thank you.